The COVID-19 virus confronts us all with an enormous amount of uncertainty. And uncertainty makes us nervous. We like to solve problems and feel like we're competent and that we've got things under control. But if you're a psychologist, social worker, psychotherapist, a nurse, or a physician, I'll bet you're working with patients who are dealing with many factors that are out of their control. So I took a look at our archives to see what we might have that could be useful. Dr. Kelly McGonigal once addressed a similar situation. In this video, she's talking about parents whose child is in crisis. They desperately want to fix the problem. It was so painful to see their child suffer. She shared a 3-step approach for working with uncertainty that I think you'll find helpful no matter what the crisis.
I find that it's very common for people who show up in my classes or my workshops. They often are at the stage of their lives where they are parents of teenagers or young adults who are struggling. It's so common. It is almost, I don't even know if I can think of people I know professionally as students or even friends who haven't experienced some kind of major crisis when their child is in that stage, whether it's in recovery for addiction or an eating disorder, being treated for depression or anxiety, having to leave college after the first semester because they weren't able to fulfill the requirements. There's a lot of crisis happening for people who are this age, and a lot of parents who are trying to control the situation. And they desperately want to be able to do something that's going to take away their child's suffering. And in particular, they so want to believe that it's going to turn out okay, and sort of a version of okay that they're comfortable with. Like, my child will beat this and never suffer in the same way again, or my child will achieve this, they'll graduate, they'll get through high school, they'll go to a good college, they'll have a successful career. So whatever it is, they have this idea that that there should be a way to do something that guarantees that kind of outcome. And so I find myself talking to a lot of parents who are living in that particular version of uncertainty, where there's real suffering or real crisis or real uncertainty about what the outcome is going to be, and a sense of paralysis about not being able to control it. And so I'll just give you a sense of the kind of things that I often talk about with them. And the first is to affirm their identity, the identity that feels like is being really challenged or threatened by this experience of uncertainty. And for them, that identity is being a caring parent, because often what they experience in this moment of uncertainty is a challenge to their value, their strengths as a parent. That if I were a good parent, this would not have happened. I would have been able to control my child's life in some way so that they didn't suffer, or they didn't fall down this hole, or they didn't end up experiencing this failure, or whatever the situation is. And so it's really important to actually affirm the identity that's challenged by whatever the experience is. And this goes not just for parenting, for this example, but in any situation where you start to feel out of control and yet you still deeply care. And it's so, to affirm that identity by saying, yeah, like, one of the reasons this is so difficult for you is because you care so much, is because you are such a caring parent, is because you are so committed and devoted, right? It's not evidence of the opposite. And to really take time to acknowledge what's difficult about it. Again, one of the things that causes people to seek control or certainty is wanting to avoid having to actually feel whatever the disappointment or the shame or the anger or the fear is, and actually give people permission to articulate and be with and acknowledge what the pain is that is making them reach for, I should be able to control this. There must be something I can do to fix this. And to really have that kind of compassionate space. And then the third step is to shift people's focus from control to choice. I mentioned that when people are dealing with wanting things to be certain, they will tell you they want to be able to control it, or they feel out of control. And it's very common for people to suggest something like, well, let's think about what you can control. What do you have control over? And that's a step in the right direction-ish, right? It's sort of useful. But I think it's much more important, rather than saying, what can you control? to ask the question, well, what can you choose in this situation? And I actually think that that's a different question. What do you want to bring to the situation? Who do you want to be in the situation? And people are more likely then to identify things like, well, what I want to choose in this situation is courage, or what I want to choose in this situation is putting my child first, or what I want to choose in this situation is reaching out for support, finding resources, as opposed to, well, what can you control? And then if you ask people, what can you control? People's minds are going to go in other directions. And I think that the last part of the sort of conversations that I have will help explain why this choice is so important. I think it's really important to bring to view a wise, compassionate perspective on things that you can't control. And there's a phrase, I alone am not the cause of this suffering, and I alone cannot resolve or cure the suffering. And that type of perspective is really important for people who are clinging to certainty or clinging to control. There is a kind of freedom that comes that allows you to re-engage with the situation and make choices that are consistent with your goals and your values and the relationships that matter to you. But I think it's really important to have a sense of surrender and a sense that you can do your best, but you can't do it all. And I think the situations that most often trigger this desire for certainty and control are the very ones that are bigger than self. And to be able to recognize that this is bigger than me is so critical.